Hello, 1301. This is the Gloria Anzaldua theme sheet. Again, I'm trying to power through 4 for 4, no retakes, just straight through, perfect. I would say this theme sheet I made in Iowa, where I worked before. And maybe since I've been in Odessa for 3 years, I'm learning stuff, I'm learning new concepts, especially since a lot of the text is in Spanish. Maybe I should update this, but it's the coronavirus, you know. Again, the theme sheet is in module 3. Entering into the serpent, it starts with USA-Mexico border culture. I think in the introduction, I don't have it on me, but the editors of the textbook call where we live, Odessa, the Permian Basin, as a place where two cultures grate against each other, and it's bloody, and it's negative. And again, she was writing this in 1985, but a lot of times I would ask, when I was going over the theme sheet, Odessa, Texas, the Permian Basin is, and I get the oil industry too, and it's tough and bust or whatever, but is Odessa, Texas a place where America hits Mexico and it's ugly and bloody and it's violent or something? Or is it a funky, cool place with different music, different restaurants? And remember, I'm coming from a little town in Iowa, Clinton, where maybe the Mexican food section was some picante sauce and some tortillas. So if you came from Clinton, Iowa, maybe it's safe and quiet there, but there's not much culture, music or food or fashion or whatever. So that could potentially be worked into one of your papers. USA is dominant, Mexico is marginalized. That may have been the case in the past, but I would ask, is that true in 2020? Does Mexico still follow America's lead, or no, what I said before, slowly but surely, the Southwest, Texas, Arizona, California, New Mexico, eventually we're marching to Fargo. And I said we, but is the United States still dominant, the moneymaker, the power broker? Number 3 says Anzaldua's writing style, mixed genre, myth, and history. Her writing style is difficult. Maybe there's a comparison to the way Said writes. A lot of times, an interesting question I would ask my students after reading both. Most of my students much prefer Anzaldua's message to Rodriguez's message, but they say Rodriguez is easier to understand. And if it's capitalism and we're here to get an A to check English off the list, Rodriguez seems more like a white writer. Okay, I got it. Like an assimilation question. Rodriguez's writing has assimilated more into American culture than Anzaldua, who is like kind of fighting the power all over the map. Her writing style, white Christians look down on other cultures' religions. That might take too much time, but I think you get the point. Sometimes I ask, like, does Mexico have the faith more than the United States in 2020? There seems like a lot more people go to church in Texas than they did. I lived in Ohio and Virginia. So, like, it's elitism, maybe. Patriarchal culture versus matriarchal culture. I talk about that in another video lecture. But is the United States associated with the patriarchy? Making money, capitalism. If you have an apple, I'm coming and take it because I'm a man. Is Hispanic culture more matriarchal culture? About your mother, about your family, about going to church. Sometimes we talk about divorce rates and what that means. Class ideology, rich and poor. Maybe in 2020, the thing that divides us more than anything else, coronavirus included, is rich and poor. The rich people have the health care to be able to go to the doctor and get what they need, and the poor people don't. But is that the same divide I talked about I asked about in the first question, Odessa, Texas, where the two cultures come together? Winners write the history books. That's kind of a deep concept, but generally, and it connects to entering into the serpent. The female saints and mythological figures over a 500-year period, the men being in charge of the government, men being in charge of the language, sort of changed that. So if you got the money and the power, you write the history, you write the truth. Kind of like alternative fact kind of deal. How we read the Spanish sections. Again, I'm sweaty, I'm crazed, either on video or live in person. Anzaldua was making me work. I'm trying to teach, but there's a paragraph in Spanish, and I don't know what Spanish means. I know what nalgas mean, but it has a deep-coded meaning for Hispanic speakers that I don't know, and it makes it harder for me. Fragmented, like Said, it goes back to the way she writes, mixing genres, myths, and history. If you remember, I said, does he write the way he does because he's at his desk, a bomb goes off, maybe his aunt gets killed going to the store? Does Anzaldua feel the same pressure or violence? Women can't buy gas at midnight in Odessa. Is the way she writes because of her culture, being afraid, being a woman or a lesbian or whatever? Serpent woman and women and sexuality. There's a lot of myth in there too. I don't necessarily know my Mexican history as well as you do, but maybe there's a paper about, we talked about Coatlapiu before, we talked about La Llorona, the Virgin of Guadalupe. But maybe if one of those means something to you in her text from your church or whatever, that could be the subject of your paper. Object versus subject, I think that's been in all three, the concept of othering, that we, the people with the money and the power and the guns marginalize the other cultures. Maybe there's a paper there. White rationale versus superstition. Like as an example, I stayed in a hotel in Florida one time with two of my friends, and they were both professors. And when I woke up the first morning, there was a little teacher star on the floor, and there was nothing in the room. And I showed it to my friends, and they're professors, and they made fun of me. They wouldn't have made fun of Gloria Anzaldua, but they made fun of me. And then I put it in another room, and the second night, that little star, when I woke up, was in my bed. And I showed it to my friends, and they made fun of me. But again, I'm going long on this one, but maybe I'm asking, is America about capitalism, making money, getting the grade? We don't have time to go to church. We don't have time, C-Rob, for your ghost stories. So, and my friend's name was Wiseman, and I'll tease him like at some point the next time I talk to him that I made fun of him in this lecture. But ultimately, superstition, what that means to you. Maybe there's a paper about a ghost story you have. La Facultad, we talked about that before. I compared it to James Baldwin, African-American writer from the 50s, pushing the white people's buttons, seeing what they got, just sort of knowing in the grocery store, feeling the racism, feeling the sexism. And Gloria Anzaldua doesn't want you to feel bad to take it. She wants you to push those buttons. How to tame a wild tongue quickly. Lose your accent is a good way to understand Anzaldua in relation to Rodriguez. Rodriguez, 1985, would tell his grandson, it's your dream job. It's you really want this job. At the interview, mask your accent. And Anzaldua might say, it's cool to speak two languages. You should highlight the way you talk. So both are writing in the 80s, but there's two different ways of looking at the concept of assimilation. Home speak versus school speak. I think we talked about the languages she speaks. It's still kind of about Spanglish and Tex-Mex. Ethnic identity is your linguistic identity, or vice versa. We talked about that. People judge you by the way you speak. Most people, all they really know about you is how you convey your thoughts. If you have low self-esteem or you feel bad about the way you talk, that might come through to when you're communicating with other people. And impact on your self-esteem, home culture. Again, like maybe somewhere in the mix, you could write one of these questions about your language, about your music, and what that means. Connecting to forbidden texts. I'm a hillbilly from Virginia. Maybe the only thing left is bluegrass. And I don't know, 2020, if it's cool to listen to bluegrass. But sometimes on Sundays, I'll find like a bluegrass station, and it reminds me of my dad and home. It's like your identity. Maybe it connects to Saeed, your home, your grandmother's house at Thanksgiving, what makes you, you. And then the last question or the concept is 21, what is normal to you, how you read or think. It's kind of a linguistic question, but again, Rodriguez writes like the American mainstream. Most of his sentences and his grammar and his punctuation are perfect. Gloria Anzaldua is like throwing everything in but the kitchen sink, including Spanish, any story she has, any kind of female saint, female deity. So she's messing with like that American mainstream norm. Okay. See you, 1301.